we are, in a way, made up of our memories as we go along. And to be deprived of that as you go into a state of dementia is really sad.
It's taken me a while to sort of trust that what I am doing is worthwhile, even though it really sort of takes people through something. Recovery rooms are a great model for how to bond over a shared experience while not dwelling on differences.
Welcome back to another episode of the Addy Hour podcast. As always, I appreciate the ways that you all are continuing to tap into these conversations, liking the episodes, sharing them with your friends, and spreading the word. That definitely helps us, and I'm grateful for all of you. So just want to start out and say that thank you. Now, today I have a really unique opportunity to be able to host the conversations that's going to be centered on an ongoing production off-Broadway in New York City called The Reservoir. This is a production that's written by Jake Brasch, also directed by Shelley Butler. And it's actually something that was initially commissioned and developed through a partnership between the Ensemble Studio Theater and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. So this is one of those where art meets science, and I'll make it even a little bit more specific. Art meets neuroscience, which you all know is something that I'm very passionate about. And so again, just honored to be able to have this conversation today, and honored to be able to host the playwright, Jake Brasch, and one of the cast members, Caroline Aaron. And I shouldn't say this out loud, but Caroline was my favorite character in the production. For whatever that's worth, we will leave that there, but you all can get to hear a little bit about that today. And before I have both of them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their journeys to this place and to this production, as you all know, I always just like to check in with folks and see how they're doing in their day-to-day as we all kind of navigate this world together. So Jake, can I have you jump in and just tell us where you are at this place today, how you're navigating your day today, and anywhere you want to take the listeners?
Sure. Well, right after this, I'm getting a root canal, so everything is going great. We're in our final little sprint towards opening our play in New York, and it's my New York debut as a playwright, my first professional production in New York. And so I'm terrified and thrilled and grateful and sort of feeling everything at everything's coming at a high velocity. Let's just say that.
Mm. Well said. Well, appreciate it. Again, I said this when we were offline as well, or before we jumped on camera, but appreciate you being here with everything you have going on today with the root canal. I know you also have rehearsal. I know there's a production tonight. So just the fact that you all are here, and I want the listeners to really have a sense of that as well, I think speaks volumes.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here.
Thanks so much. Caroline, how are you at this moment? I know we talked a little bit offline as well, but wherever you want to take us.
I'm certainly not alone in this. I have to go on a news diet, and being in a production that's extremely demanding and takes up a lot of time means that I'm not watching the news, which in a strange way, even though this is a play about mental health, is restoring my mental health. Because the less time I spend watching the news, the better it is, but I can't seem to tear myself away from current events. And I was also doing a play this time last year off-Broadway that I really was enjoying, but I would come home every night after the show and I would say to my husband, I've never been so happy. And then there's a quadrant of me that's heartbroken at all times. And that's kind of how I feel, just a tiny bit heartbroken based on what's going on in our world. And I'm not exactly sure how to recover from that at the moment.
I appreciate that level of honesty. And I think that speaks volumes too. I mean, that's something we're often talking about on college campuses too. And
Really?
I've heard different psychologists say, you have to get to a place where you got to curate your news, because there's that tendency to really try and, I want to make sure I'm tapped in and I know what's going on. But there's also that tendency to overdo it and become completely consumed by it. So I think the fact that you're sharing that with everybody really speaks volumes as well. And it's something we all kind of have to kind of work through and work on day to day.
Absolutely. And now it's 24 hours news cycles. So, it's hard to resist.
Yeah. In a sense, it's a discipline, I feel like, too, to be able to have that.
So great about being a part of this production is it's extremely absorbing uh,
Mm.
time and your heart and your talent. And so there's, there's not like a lot left over to leave me and watch MSNBC.
Yeah.
Um,
Well
things like
said.
for me, that's a very good thing.
Yeah, well said. So let's talk about the production a little bit and how you all got to this point. So Jake, as the playwright, maybe you can just tell our listeners a little bit about your path into this aspect of your career and how this play got birthed in the first place.
Sure. So the play was initially a commission from the Ensemble Studio Theater's Sloan project, which commissions plays that are about science or feature science. And so I started with the concept of cognitive reserve, which is um, essentially the idea of what, if anything, can one do to protect themselves from decline or even from injury. Um, and so it's why people do puzzles. It's why people eat certain ways, exercise, all of those fun things that folks do, trying to ward off, the coming fears of Alzheimer's or dementia. So I started there after desperately looking for a topic to write about as I was writing
Mm.
a one-page proposal, trying to piece together a career as a writer, and kind of accidentally realized that I had to write about my grandparents and my experiences of moving home to get sober and reconnecting with my grandparents who were all four in various stages of decline. And
Mm.
I made a connection based on sort of the fogginess of early recovery and what they were going through. And together kind of resolved to first try to fix what was happening and then to accept it. The play was commissioned. There were a bunch of workshops at EST, and then it's been on this amazing and honestly shocking path of several productions throughout the country.
Mm. Mhm.
And it's opened every door for me, right? As a writer, all of my dreams have come true through a play about the worst year of my life, which I
Mm.
think has been a lesson that, hearing you, Caroline, I was so moved by what you said about the world right now and having a part of your heart always broken. And what I'm trying to hold on to in this moment is that I am living. I am living a time in which I have made something beautiful out of something horrible, and
Mm. Yeah.
I hope on the macro scale we can do something similar.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you taking us through that journey. And I mean, even just hearing you talk about the process, I mean, I can hear some of the emotion coming through as
Um,
well. But I think it's also helpful for people to hear about that process, even the way that you started. It's not like you had all these ideas at once. Like, I'm going to go in and write about my life story, and to see how that came about. Because again, as we'll talk about, in this conversation, just the power of the production itself too. It could be easy for people to be like, oh wow, well, this is someone had this in their mind. They had this journey. They're just going to put it out there, and they had all these intentions. And that, from what I'm hearing from you, that was not how you went into this at all.
no, I mean, I think that it's so important to understand that I wrote the first draft of this play in 2019, and now it's 2026. It has been through so many workshops, it has been through several productions, and I'm putting in rewrites today. Sorry,
Mm.
Caroline. I'm not sure you know about that yet. Like it is a constant process to try to arrive at the thing that you think that your piece of art wants to be. And even
Mm.
I feel like sometimes forget when I'm seeing other pieces of art. I think like, wow, this feels so singular and fresh and easeful. And the amount of work that it takes to make something look easeful
Mm.
in any discipline, right?
Hmm.
Everyone who really gets into the craft of making something understands that. So I cannot emphasize enough
Yeah.
how much work and how many brilliant brains I've needed to sort of wrap my head around what the play wants to be.
Mm. So well said. Caroline, anything you want to react to and what Jake's mentioned so far?
Yeah. I think it's very exciting to be involved in this process, and I would say for live theater, maybe it's not true of other things. It's never finished because
Mm.
it's alive.
Mm.
And, when you're sitting in the dark and watching a play, then you become part of the process too. And that's one of the exciting things about working in the live theater. Tennessee Williams, after he won the Pulitzer Prize and the Tony Award for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, he rewrote the ending. And so you can buy a copy of that play with the ending that was originally produced, but I mean, Jake can agree or disagree, but I do think that this is constantly evolving, and he will come to see this play. Maybe, he'll go to a production of this a year from now and go, "Oh, I want to do this. I see something that I didn't see there before." And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said. Caroline, what was your journey to this point in your career in this production?
Well, I think, Jake, is it 2 years ago? The Denver Center for the Performing Arts, I had done it once before, does a new play festival where they read,
Mm,
where you don't put up a production, but you do a sort of not even a staged reading, but a reading of a new piece of work. And I did that in Denver, I think 2 years ago. And I was very intrigued by the play. It was not with the group that we're with now necessarily, but it was there and the same director and was just letting it hit the air. The difference between writing for yourself or just reading it out loud yourself and then said you have an audience there and you're reading out loud, it's hitting the air. You can feel when the audience leans in, when they
mm,
back, all of those kinds of things. And that's all information for the writer to say, where am I hooking people in terms of the story I'm trying to tell? And then revisions start to happen. So I did that, and then that was 2 years ago. And then as Jake said, it started having a meteoric rise across the country in every major city, the last of which I think was LA. Was that the last city before this city? And I knew several people who
mm,
had participated in that part of the journey of this play. And then when they were doing it in New York, where I'm living now, I
mm,
was excited to be asked to be a part of it. So that's how and it had evolved in those 2 years. It had been through, so many different casts and so many different
mm.
productions that I'm now meeting the play a little more grown up. You know,
Wow.
it's like being
Yeah.
separated. You read and then you see them again 3 years later and you go, "It's not a baby anymore." Now I'm laughing and talking, and that's kind of
Yeah.
how I arrived in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I should say, when I heard Caroline read this play,
Mhm.
after several workshops, I was like, "Oh, there's the character. There
Mm,
she is." And, so much of this play was shaped around, what she brought to the role and her
mm,
intelligence within it and sort of her singular way of being the funniest person on stage and yet so deeply biting and honest. And I just want to lift her up as a true legend of the American
mm.
theater. You asked, where how she got to this point, and she told you about this play. But I suggest that everybody goes down the Caroline Aaron rabbit hole and watch all of her great films
Mm.
and ask folks to regale you on stories of all of the plays that she's done over decades of brilliant work.
Thank you. Thank
Very
you.
well said. Very well said. And well deserved too. So as you all are talking, this makes me curious about aspects of collaboration. Because as Jake, you mentioned, both of you mentioned, this has evolved over time. There's been workshops, there's all these pieces. What does that actually look like for each of the cast members and for you, Jake, as a playwright? And how do you get to that place together?
I mean, for me, there's nothing better than developing a play with directors, designers, actors. The best moment for me is when the play takes on a life of its own, and that cannot happen until it's in a room with a bunch of people. I hate writing the first draft of plays. Being alone with a play is hell for me. But and I think that depends on the writer, right? Like I think there are other folks who think like, oh, bringing it in a room is a place to feel misunderstood. But I love having an actor saying like, I don't understand this. What am I supposed to do? And then I have to either defend my choice and try to explain it, or I have to be like, wait a minute, maybe it's not clear. And through all of those little micro decisions, you wind up with something that is bigger than anything that you could make on your own. And
Mm,
that is what I love about working in a collaborative environment. It's also what's cursed about working in a collaborative environment, right? Because sometimes someone will have an idea that sounds good and it turns out that it has ramifications that you're not aware of, or, it's
mm,
alive in every single aspect. So it's essential that you surround yourself with people whom you trust and the right people. And to have Shelley Butler on this play, who is somebody who we see the same thing on stage, we can disagree productively. We're not afraid
mhm,
to have conflict, which I think a
mm.
lot of times folks are.
Yeah.
But then on the other side of the coin, like we know how to resolve conflict and we know how conflict becomes productive, as I said. And Um, so that process over time and starting with readings, as Caroline talked about, and then going towards workshops and then going into production and then going through previews, right? Or I would say rehearsal and then previews, in which you're bringing it in front of audiences, getting feedback and putting new changes in. It's just whittling away.
And I
Imagine sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say, unfortunately, in our world today, I think in lots of things we've eliminated process. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
So result oriented that it's supposed to come out of the typewriter a masterpiece, and that's not how
mm,
theater works because it's a team sport. It's never been a singular art form in a sense. It is like what Jake is talking about is we're his clay, but he can't make something without us in a way, meaning the actors, the designers, the director, and then finally the audience. One of the
mm,
directors I was lucky enough to work with was the great Mike Nichols. And whenever I was in anything Mike was directing, he would always say to us, well, we don't know what we have until the folks come and then they
mm.
tell us. Do you know what I mean? You can feel when people are lost or they're not moved or they're not engaged. And then it's your job to figure out a way especially with something that is this personal and important. I feel like this piece of material is, um, you know, laughter being the best medicine, but there's some medicine here in this piece of
Yeah,
material that I'm
yeah,
sure you've seen it.
mhm,
Without the laughter, maybe it wouldn't taste as good because it's an awfully tasty production, I have to say,
yeah.
that the
I agree.
audience enjoys. But there is a kind of medicinal effect on the audience, I think, from seeing it and experiencing it. It has, all of the earmarks of being human, and
Yeah,
that's why we're all there, I think,
yeah,
is
yeah.
to see the dark with other human beings, and we've sort of eliminated process because I'm older than you gents. We used to rehearse plays for 6 weeks. I can't remember the last time that happened because it's all economic, so that's too expensive, right?
Mm,
Plays used to go out of town and have several I mean, Jake has been very fortunate as a young playwright in that this play has been, quote, unquote, "out of town" before he came into to New York, do you know what I mean? And I
mhm,
a lot of things where I go, "Oh, it's just not cooked yet," but people are anxious to get their money back, meaning with their ticket sales and putting things on, and you think, "Oh my gosh, if they'd had more of an incubation it would have
mm,
really risen up as a very special piece of material, and it's just sort of sad that we've kind of eliminated process in so many ways. I think, process is one of the most exciting things about making anything. I mean,
yeah.
even for you as a professor, um, you know, it's an exciting time to have other professors and other people who do what you do sort of
Yeah,
collaborate with you before you go into a
yeah,
classroom.
yeah. So well said. I mean, you all are, this is not supposed to be personal to me, but there's so many things you all are forcing me to reflect on too. I mean, being in an academic space, Aldeval's working on a book project that's gone for a few years, gone longer than I imagined. So, Jake, even the way you phrase things at the beginning is also giving me life to think about that part of the process too. And I'll definitely agree with you, Caroline. This play felt so human. I mean, that's one of the things that I took away from it. In addition to really well integrating the science and the neuroscience and the mental health, just the humanity of the relationships really, and for someone, I feel like people who come to this, it's very easy to get pulled into it. Like, even if it's not your story. Like, I felt like I was living the play out as an outsider sitting there in the theater. So, as I'm hearing you all talk, just seeing all of that process. But also, I'm also just trying to think about, like, so you talked about the collaboration. How did that actually come out when you get to the stage? Because again, you deal with really heavy topics. There's an aspect of humor, but there's also a lot of fluidity to how the conversations were happening on stage. So I'm not asking this question very well, but I think I'm just trying to get a peek inside into how that, I won't call it magic because there's a lot of work that was done, but how did that all come together that you were able to do this so beautifully?
Well, I think that one of the things when you went a little bit about and backstage of collaboration, certainly with Jake,
Mm,
not
hmm.
every playwright, it's like every single time I'm involved in a project, it's like, I had a great teacher once say, when I said, "What's your advice for a beginning actor?" And he said, "Never stop being a beginning actor." And that's
Oh,
really something I have lived by, is that every time you're starting over with a new group of creative people, but like as an example, since you've seen the play, this won't be completely resonant for your audience, but my son, not my grandson, but my son does not appear in the play. He's talked about. So I've talked to Jake about what were the consequences of my character's life and how, and I obviously am estranged from my son. He doesn't appear in the play. He's referenced. We don't go down that particular rabbit hole. But in terms of collaboration, I've talked to Jake about it and said, maybe we should put him in here. Maybe we should put him in here. And Jake will either say yes, he'll try it, we do it, it doesn't belong, or he'll know
Mm,
right away instinctually it doesn't belong, but I can tell you as the actor so I can bring it through what the story is. Because you can't tell all the stories all the time in one play. The fluidity is, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, Jake. You're gonna tell me. I'm gonna give Shelley credit for this because she has beaten us down into into this sort of like this roller coaster ride and taken away all of our actor tools. There's not really a set. There's no runway into these big emotional moments. You just have to plop yourself down inside of them as an actor. And that's a hard thing to do. Do you know what I mean? It's a really hard thing to do. But I think Shelley has been very adamant about us not lingering and not, taking too much time to sit in any one moment because it is the sum of its parts, I think, that makes this play work. If you spent too much time in any one part, you wouldn't get the whole. And
mm,
that's the point.
Yeah.
What
I
do
mean,
you
I will say that the play is tonally incredibly specific.
Yeah.
And I think that the play actually benefits from a lot of ignorance when I wrote it. Like
mm,
I, I didn't fully realize what I was making, which is I like to joke is a 2-hour movement piece for 4 senior citizens and a twink. Um and but it's incredibly um it moves, right? And it does not stop. And it takes out of the gate, you know, most of the characters are on stage the entire time.
mhm,
The lead character is speaking for the majority of the play, connects directly with the audience. There is nowhere to hide. As Caroline said, there are no props. You are sort of just dropped into what it means to be inside of this character's brain who's on this insane roller coaster of trying desperately to get well.
mhm,
Um, and if you get off the train, the whole thing crashes. I mean,
mm,
so
mhm.
it's
Yeah.
like kind of wild. And more about the tone is that I feel like this play does this very tricky thing in which it asks you to laugh about the things that are like two of the most awful things that affect every family in the world, right?
Mhm,
Which are dementia and addiction, right? And I think I have never met a family that aren't touched by both of those diseases in some way. And usually it's deeply personal. And the thing
mhm,
about sitting in this audience is that the laughter, I think, actually pulls folks in closer so that the emotional
mm,
moments when they do hit feel sort of like a slap, you know?
mm, mm,
And
mhm,
it's taken me a while to sort of trust that what I am doing is worthwhile, even though it really sort of takes people through something,
mm,
right? I'm a people pleaser at my core. And so I'm like,
mm,
oh God, have I done something? Is this okay? And I think what I've come to, and I'd be curious to hear if you agree, is something that gives folks enough entertainment and enough laughter so that they actually are not guarded for when they're kind of destroyed. And to me, that's what it
yeah,
feels like to be alive, sort of at its
yeah,
core. And it means that the folks who are coming in to hate the play will hate it, and the folks who are coming in to love it will love it, and everything in between.
yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate you being brave in that sense because I'm hearing you even talk about the ups and the downs of just
Yeah.
putting it out there. And I still, I mean, it's still so important. And for me, again, as a quote unquote outsider, but also as a neuroscientist, it was refreshing to see the way that you pulled those pieces in and out. I mean, even thinking about stressors that come up, how that leads to relapse. I mean, I'm not everybody thinks as I do, but I'm thinking about what's happening in the brain. How's that
Hmm.
impacting this relationship? So to see that so accurately reflected was refreshing. At the same time, I was still able to feel it. So I didn't come in just kind of analyzing, but I'll still pull into the emotion of it. And even when I could anticipate something was still going to happen, I still felt disappointed. I still felt the sadness at the disrupted relationships and things like that that happened. So again, kudos to you for being able to tie all those together. This is maybe too much of a personal question, but how did you get so centered and really accurately reflecting the sobriety journey, the recovery journey and the scientific aspect of that and the complicated cross general relationships? I know that's not an easy question, but that again, that just was it seemed to me to be at the core of the production.
I mean, the answer is having lived through it, right?
Mm,
And I
mhm,
think I wrote this play at a time in which I was uniquely able to remember exactly what it felt like to be going through early recovery, but with enough distance so that I could write about it somewhat objectively. I
mm,
wonder now if now I feel sort of like I don't know if I could write about this accurately. There's so much muck and feeling inside of it that feels so wrapped up into what that was actually like. And I've had the benefit of, coming up on 12 years of sobriety in which I
mhm,
have gotten pretty much everything back. And this is about a character who lost everything, right? Um, and that sort of what does it mean to turn the corner and to sort of have the humiliating moment of defeat that leads to a beautiful life, right?
mm,
Um, and then I think on the intergenerational side of it, I started with a desire to write fully fledged, fully formed characters for older actors. I was, at the Ensemble Studio Theater where I was working, all of my friends were casting their young actor friends in their plays. And there was this entire ensemble of actors who had been a part of the company since the 70s that were just
mm.
not being used. Or if they were
Oh, wow.
used, they were like joking around backstage and then plopped into a wheelchair and rolled on stage for a like two-line role, right? And
Yeah.
I was just like, what are we doing? And so I actually started writing for older actors kind of selfishly. I was like, well,
Mm,
I have like these amazing actors that I can cast. Why not cast them? And then I kind of realized that like those folks are bringing so much experience and wisdom and wildness and wackiness and shamelessness and horniness to their characters. And I just became obsessed with writing for them. And also, my grandparents were huge parts of my life, and especially the
mm,
grandmother that Caroline's character is loosely based on was the person who brought me to my first play. She was the person who very early on was like, you know, you don't like Annie, you like West Side Story. You're wrong, actually,
mm,
and I will tell you why, right? And
mm.
sort of I had the interests of a 70-year-old woman as a small child, and she loved me for it and took me all around the world to see art and to really analyze things. And I will say that she was someone who was not an artist at all. She was a scientist. She was an electrical engineer, but really believed at her core that the arts were an essential
Mm,
thing to consume, just like food, just like water. You were going to the symphony, you were going to the opera, you were going to the theater, you were going to the museums. That is what you do as a human being.
mm,
So I think I knew that like I wanted to honor older actors, I wanted to honor her, I wanted to honor my grandparents, and I wanted to write something that was specifically about grandparent grandchild relationships as opposed to parent child relationships, which I think are mostly shown in
yeah,
media.
yeah,
And something I've been really surprised about is sort of how disarmed people are by seeing four grandparents and a grandchild in a play. When I would think that that would be something that would be more prevalent in our culture, considering that it's truly a universal experience. Um, and yet it's not.
It's not because I think one of the things that's so unique about this and is maybe hitting a nerve for people is we live in a culture where as you age, you become invisible. And Jake,
mm,
that invisibility, and now he's made it visible that these are, almost everything. I always say that if there's going to be a character my age, there's one. There's not
mm,
4. I mean, even the backstage camaraderie of having your peer group around you when you're my age, we're usually, you know, on the one and only,
mm,
in any particular story, because the story is usually not told about, people after a certain age. It's amazing. I don't know if this has always been true in American culture, but,
mm,
the invisibility factor of being older and the fact that they are essential to the healing of this young man. They're not only there and portrayed, they are necessary. And
mhm,
in our entertainment, we have not made older people necessary to the human experience. And I think, how dumb of us. How
yeah,
really dumb. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And I hope that this play will inspire other people to
Mm,
holistically at
yeah.
being human at any age, and what that has to teach us all about other ages that we've either passed through or we are coming up on.
Mm,
Believe me, going home at night and going, "Oh my god, this is a preview that I'm playing every night of where I'm headed," and I'm thinking, "Uh-oh, this is it's something." It's really something, I have to say.
yeah.
Well, and I'll say that there's a lot of, I think folks often ask me about what is it like to show your recovery journey on stage, and I will
Mm,
say it's
yeah.
like deeply fictionalized too, which helps.
Yeah.
But I wish folks would ask more. What is it like for these older actors to be
Mm,
in this play in which they are playing fully formed, you know, characters, and yet characters that are sort of staring down their own demise, right? Like, it's a lot. It's a lot that I'm asking from everybody. And I hope that folks know that I'm aware of that and that I'm trying to do that as like kindly as possible while engaging with it fully and head on, right? And I applaud these actors for really going there, and I applaud our audiences for really going there and for kind of coming in and not being resistant to looking at the hard things.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's, there's also another layer in this, which is intergenerational things that I have children, adult children, and I go, "Oh my god, my generation versus their generation, and where is there commonality and where is there overlap?" It feels like the distance between generations is much bigger than it used to be.
Mm,
A lot of that has to do with technology, so that my children were in the world and connected to the world as well as to me very early. That was not true of me because I didn't have the internet. When my children were in school,
mm,
I mean, saying to my husband, "I can't relate to their childhood because,
mm.
they're talking to people in Russia. They you know what I mean? It's like all the
Yep.
time they are plugged into the world." And I go, "Wow, that's such a different experience." But there's a moment in this play where the other grandmother, not me, um, the character says that she disapproved of him, and they
Mhm.
found a way around that. And
Yep.
this young man finds his way around it. And I think that's one of the, in our cancel culture, I think what happens is if somebody does not line up with your point of view, with your vocabulary, with all of those kinds of things, they just get canceled. And in this play, the other grandmother has a hard time with this young man's sexuality, but uh, he sticks with it. He knows that there's other ore to mine inside this woman. This may be a limitation of her age and her generation, but it doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mm.
And I think
Mhm.
we're all a little guilty of that.
Yeah.
Um,
The other thing I will say about that is that one of the things that I'm trying to say in conversations like this is that I think recovery rooms are a great model
Mm.
for how to
mm,
bond over a shared experience
Mhm.
while not dwelling on differences, right? And I think it's a
Yep.
very fine line, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not okay for someone to disapprove of one sexuality. It's not
Mm.
okay.
Mm.
And yet, what are is where do we sort of draw the line versus when do we engage and what do we
Mhm.
engage about and how? And I think it's a
Mhm.
conversation in every family in this country in this moment. Um, but in the rooms of recovery, you have people who have this powerful shared experience who all
Mhm.
believe radically different things of even how to solve that, right? Like
Yeah.
there's the
Yeah.
spiritual aspect. Some
Mhm.
people are believers, some people are not, some people are atheists, some people are Satanists, like,
Mm.
and yet here they all are
Mm.
in a room having nothing else in common except for that they have been through this
Mm.
one very specific experience together.
Mhm.
And I think our play is largely about that, right? Is like these four grandparents connecting with this queer,
Mhm.
Jewish, sort of in some ways deeply arrogant outsider who challenges them and vice
Mhm.
versa, right?
Yeah.
And I think it asks those thorny questions about when to engage, when not to engage, when to draw boundaries, when to accept folks. And I hope it asks the questions without answering them because I'm not sure there are good answers.
Yeah.
no, I
And
think
I think
so.
again that was another refreshing part, just as you both stated, because you leaned into those. I won't call them gray areas, but those tension points,
That's
and
right.
that came out. That also adds to the humanity, and because they all didn't break down cleanly.
Right.
Some had healing, some were left open ended, and so again, I think that was another aspect that really just pulled people in. But I mean, so many lessons from everything that you all shared that I think folks will really take away from it. Caroline, one curiosity that I have for you as well, because you've alluded to this a few times, and just also the uniqueness of this cross generational approach, and not having you as the sole older individual with all the wisdom who then doesn't get to share that wisdom, but actually just comes in for a moment and removed and is left out of the production. What was that actually like from a process standpoint, working with other people in your cohort in a sense? And how did that dynamic play out on the stage as well?
It was thrilling and way less lonely than it
Mm.
usually is because we shared experiences that we can
Hmm.
refer to, but also that idea that just I think we tend to think of older people as all having the same personality, or people with dementia all having the same personality. Your mind can be in pieces, but the pieces are very unique to the person whose mind is fracturing apart. And in this play, the young man finds those unique pieces that identify each one of these people. His other grandmother sings, and whether it's coming from some mysterious place inside this broken brain,
Mm.
uh, he can relate to a broken brain. His brain is broken, and their brains are breaking down. It's
Mm.
and one of my favorite parts of the play is when the professor, the part that you would play in real life,
True.
this young man, um, you can rebuild the damage that you have caused yourself by this addiction. It can be restored and regenerated, but for them, it can't. And that's what he's desperately longing for, is a way to reinstate who they used to be mentally, and that's not gonna happen, and it takes the whole play for him to accept that, and when the professor says to him, "Get to know these people." Get to and, I thought about it, when that one line is, "What do you hold on to? What do you remember?" So after you've lived a life of 70, 80 years, right, you can't hold on to all of it. The brain is not meant to hold on to all of it. And it's amazing. I don't think it's conscious on any of our parts, but what are our memories, and what lands on us in a way that never
Mm.
leaves?
Hmm.
I became a grandmother, which was very exciting, but I was just so absolutely flabbergasted by how I did not remember my children's early years in the way
Mm.
forgot everything. I don't know how to do this. I don't, and of course, parenting goes through fashion. So hemlines are shorter or long. That generation is having the babies, but there were still,
Hmm.
right. I would say to my husband, "Do you remember when Ben did this? Do you remember when he first started walking? Do you remember when he gave up the bottle?" All of the life stages that as you're raising an infant up into a person, I went, wow, it's amazing. And then there's that highlight reel that never goes away. That was
Hmm.
the first time they did this, or the most amazing thing
Mm.
here. And I think, this play has made me think about what my highlight reel is. What is
Mm.
forgotten,
Mm.
what has been saved, inside of me in terms of my own life's journey, kind of thing. I mean, even in terms of what we do, people have come to the play and said, "You and I did a such and such together," and I'll fake my way through it and I go, "Oh yeah, that was so fun." And I'll have what you know what I mean? You just
Yeah.
Yes, our
Yeah.
brains don't store everything. There's only so much. It's like there's only I had a great aunt one, and I would be reading comic books when I was staying with her, and she would always say to me, "You better be careful what you learn, because every time you learn something, you kick something else out. If you're gonna read Betty Veronica, you might be kicking out Shakespeare." And I went, "Okay,
My goodness.
I exactly." I I I think that idea of we are, in a way, made up of our memories as we go along, and to be deprived of that as you go into a state of dementia is really sad,
Well,
really.
and it's interesting, and I'd actually be curious to hear more from you. I bet you have a lot more intel on this than I do, but this play has made me think about memory and also the way that we reconstruct things, and
Hmm.
how
Yep.
memories change over time,
Hmm.
and sort of the stories that we tell ourselves to make
Yep.
sense of ourselves,
Yeah.
right? I think at its core, I've had so many experiences in which, I'll have a memory and then someone will show me a video of the memory I have and I'll be like, wait. what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That it's not what we think it is, right? It's not
Hmm.
that I'm
Hmm.
actually storing something. And something that I'll say is for me, like, I feel like this is not in the play at all, but it's just true. I don't have a very good memory, which I think actually serves me as an artist. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep doing this. Um, but like, I don't process things forever. I kind of am in the moment that I'm in, and then I'm like, really? I don't remember that. I have that moment all the time, Caroline, where like people come up to me and they're like, oh my God, this so reminds me of that. And I'll be like, yes, Veronica. Who is Veronica?
Nice.
Who could Veronica
Yeah.
possibly be? And to this day, I have more memories of being like, how did that person remember something that I have literally no recollection of? Anyway, I don't that's kind of I don't really have a question there, but I'm just curious about that soup and sort of how do you think about that? And more specifically, how do you think about uh art in our relationship to our own brains?
Yeah. I mean, lots of different thoughts there. One with the memory piece, and you all have alluded to this already, just the reconstructing that happens
Hmm.
and how it doesn't also always necessarily fit what we think it is. But I guess also, I mean, so what I actually study, what my team studies is addiction, depression, and
Oh
anxiety.
wow.
So even when I'm thinking about memory, I'm also thinking about the stories we tell ourselves and the perspectives. I mean, so as you allude to throughout the production, the stories that can get misconstrued during someone's recovery journey. I mean, that especially happens in depression, where you can start to see the world a certain way and convince yourself it is that way that doesn't actually match reality, but matches your experience. So, someone that has had lots of different stressors, or someone's gone through trauma, how that also changes the brain, changes how you process, and changes how you actually perceive something, even if that's not the reality. So, I mean, there's so many layers to this. And I know we haven't talked about neuroplasticity here. That's a word that people like to talk about a
Hmm.
lot, but it's really how our experiences actually change our brains and can actually change what we perceive, change our memory or what we think we remember. And so I guess what this is a not a very well formulated way of answering your question or thought, but also think about the importance. I often talk about the importance of community and that as well. When we get led astray by our own brain, do we have others in community who can help us reset? And I think that's one thing you've done so beautifully in this production because that's what the grandparents did in so many ways, and they're all doing it together. So it's almost like they are teaching each other's brains what is true versus what was perceived, which may be a little bit askew or maybe askew, and that can be fine because there are aspects of that where you have to sometimes, and you show this in play too, you have to just accept that this might not be the reality, but it's what this person experiences. And I have to be able to let that go. And like we said at the beginning, decide what battles to kind of tackle and which ones to kind of let fly. So not the most well formulated answer, but there's so many layers to that as well. And again, you can hear in how I'm talking as a neuroscientist, I'm centering it on the brain. I know that's not the only thing that's important in
Yeah.
life, but that's
I
how
think
I think about life.
the thing that you bring up, which is important in the play and important for people seeing the play, is we are each other's witnesses. And
Hmm.
if we isolate ourselves, then we don't have that opportunity. And I think people sitting in the dark watching a play are witnessing something. But family, first and foremost, are your witnesses of your memories. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that way, yes, it did happen that way. Whatever it is really, I think, important, and that's why community, I believe you're so right, is a tool of mental health, and it has broken down, and it has so disappeared. It's one of the things that they keep talking about that technology is depriving us of.
Yeah.
Much
Yeah.
of a miracle as it is, because it's connecting us to so much information so quickly, but where's
Hmm.
our community? Even in what
Yeah.
we don't audition in person anymore. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Things like that. All the actors I know, and we talk with nostalgia. I mean, Jake has never even been a part of this, but like going to an audition, going in, being really bad, being depressed, saying to another actor, "What are you doing? Nothing. Let's go eat and then go to a movie." This builds a community. You know what I mean? We don't have those anymore because
Mm.
everything's sort of in isolation, and we need to replace it or we need to insist on it because I think our mental health is going to suffer as a society without. And I sort of see, but I mean, people are not necessarily affiliated with formal religions anymore, or
Mm. Mm.
all the places where there was sort of gathering around the campfire. That's what I think of theater as, is we're
Yeah.
gathering around the campfire once again. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
it's so important.
Yeah.
Can
Definitely
I
agree.
ask you a question that I'm curious about? like, hearing you say that, Caroline, about like, you know, religion or sports teams or whatever gathers people communally, how do you think about when I hear you talk about reality, like people who are not connected to reality, and whether or not to meet people on their own planes or the plane of the truth? My first thought is like, well, whose reality, right?
Mm, hmm.
And sort of what is the functional philosophy that one should have in order to live truthfully, healthily in the world? And how do you think about, you know, something that I, as a Jew and as a person in recovery, think about is that it's like the questions are often more interesting than the answers, and that like,
Mm,
that Nietzsche quote about like the test of a belief is not how true it is, but how helpful it is. Like, how do you
mm.
think about like the realm of the spiritual or the realm of sort of like choosing a framework through which to view life as a neuroscientist?
Yeah. So many ways I could take that question. There's a philosophical side of things. Maybe I'll start with kind of the research lens too, because I think a lot about,
Hmm.
again, the anxiety, depression, and addiction. So oftentimes, if people are asking about someone not being themselves, like you have someone in your life who seems to be kind of having a hard time with that anxiety or with depression or even with addiction. So oftentimes we tell people if that's disrupting kind of their day to day living, and people are like, oh, I don't know when to ask the person if they should get help or if they should just continue on. So if the person doesn't quite see themselves, so someone who's really maybe low key all the time, who's really amplified and really loud and can't seem to center themselves, or someone who's really loud who becomes really apathetic and isolated and those types of things. And then we often tell people if it's disrupting kind of your day to day experience.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not saying that's the best way to answer it, but in that sense, if it's disrupting and becoming hurtful to that person's everyday life experience, that is a reality that others can see that's disrupting their life and disrupting what they do. And that kind of becomes the litmus test or test to say, okay, this is something that has to be intervened. And oftentimes that is because something has happened to them or something's happened in their brain that's leading them astray from who they really are. And so that's just one way to answer it, but that's one thing that's often in my mind because it helps people at least have a framework for the goal here is to have a holistic and productive life. And once things are astray from that, there could be a shift that's not reflective of who you are as a real person. Not that you're not a real person, but who you are at your core. But I guess from a bigger philosophical standpoint, I often try and think about things holistically, just in general. And even as this podcast, we tie in the neuroscience, the mental health, the faith piece, the social justice piece. And so all those things together. And I think for us as a society, it's too easy to say, I'm only going to look at things through the lens of my faith, or only through the lens of the brain, or only through the lens of this community. And for me, I'm always trying to say, what does that actually look like holistically? Because again, all those things impact our brains. And so while I'm not saying giving one specific answer for it has to be this specific philosophical pathway or this specific framework, I think we have to be honest about, is this actually helping someone thrive in their lives? And another layer of that, is this helping us thrive as a community and as a global community? And I don't think I don't have the answer for that, but that's often how I try. I don't know. Did that get at your question?
Yeah, it does.
It
It
does.
does.
That idea that we've always heard that what makes a person is, nature and nurture. And I always thought,
Hmm.
"But what about what happens to you? Why doesn't that have as big a piece of that pie of determining who somebody is?" It's like I remember after 9/11 happened, and I thought, all of those children whose parents went to work that day and went down in a tower, and they're young now, it will determine the
Yes.
outcome of who they are as adults.
Yeah.
My father died when I was a child, and
Yeah.
I can from this perspective of looking back, I can see the nature part of me, I can see the nurture part, but
Hmm.
I also see that part of me. Growing
Yeah.
up as a fatherless little girl, I mean, that shaped me, and we
Yeah.
don't talk about that we don't talk
Exactly.
about things that happen to us as having as much prominence in shaping who we are. So I'm glad to hear it does shape who we are, even down
Yeah.
to our brains, it can shape our
Yeah.
brain. I didn't even know that trauma can shape your brain, but
Yeah.
I guess it
Definitely.
can.
Yep. And then Jake, that ties back to your question too, because for too long, people haven't acknowledged
Yeah.
that is actually changing the brain and how you perceive the world and can distort things. But also it's this fine line. And this is why it's hard to answer the question between what is the reality outside of you, but what is also the reality of what happened to you that's causing you to see things a certain way. And you can't deny that. If someone has experienced a trauma, you can't just say, oh, well, that happened to you, but that's not really how people treat people. That's not helpful. You have to say, okay, that happened to you. That is changing how it's causing you to have these guardrails. Your brain is responding a different way. And so it's almost like acknowledging the truths on both sides, even where it becomes messy. And maybe that's actually
Mhm.
this but that is leading me to think about your production as well. Cause again, you delve into the messiness of all these things and all these relationships. So, but I
Well,
appreciate you
it,
the way you asked the question.
he
Well,
introduced
I think
parents,
sorry.
witnesses to this little boy's life. That's the way each grandparent comes on stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Not necessarily a consequential memory, but something that's been very signature in their minds about this now young man when he was little. And all of our memories, in a way, tie into something about him, which is that he was advanced, he
Hmm.
was precocious, he was in the world in a very special way. But I like that we each come on as, testifying
Yeah. Yeah.
his his past, which he can't quite access right now
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he's all full of, you know, disease in a way.
Jake, do you have a reflection or a thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was thinking about, this character. Something that I've actually had trouble articulating that feels so essential to this play is that this is about someone who feels that their job is to figure out their own brain. And the
Hmm.
actual lesson that they come to is how do you live with your own brain, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and sort of acceptance and kind of, knowing he says the cray cray isn't going away, right? Like, and how do you sort of, and also for those of us, who have struggled with addiction or
Hmm.
anxiety or, that there's also just self knowledge that sort of
Yeah.
allows you to live your life in spite
Yeah.
of what your brain is telling you, and I sometimes I feel like I'm almost in a video game of being like my first impulse is to keep doing something that I know that is gonna hurt me. And so
Mm.
I actually have to take an action that's separate from what my brain is telling me to do. And slowly over time, that accumulates into a life that doesn't look like the one that I would have built for myself had I just been following all of my impulses. But that doesn't mean that those impulses go away. Sometimes they do,
Exactly.
sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And I think there's also an interesting thing about like when does one actually have to be like, this is the hand that I've been dealt
Mhm.
versus I can fix this. It's such an interesting thing. It has medication implications. It has um implications around sort of like what kind of life am I choosing for myself? Which rooms am I bringing myself into?
Hmm.
And so I'm thinking a lot about the holisticness of what you're talking about and just the humility that it takes to have the self-knowledge in order to like live the life that you actually want for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
My
So well
character
said.
says, "Stop trying to fix everything." That's what he's trying to do is fix everything, and I'm encouraging him to let go of that, that's part of
Hmm.
what keep him trapped inside his own addiction is this,
Hmm.
you know, is that this delusion that he can fix everything that, I think it has to do with control. Is when do we let go? And do we not? And all of those kinds of things are also part of this play. I say to him a couple of things like that because I've been there, and I know
Mm.
that until he throws overboard certain notions of control and that he's gonna fix everything and that he can change everything. That's very interesting, that idea that you can feel an impulse to do something that's self-destructive. You can also overrule that impulse by
Hmm.
another part of your brain, by
Exactly.
something in it
Well
much,
said. Well said.
what I mean?
Yep. I'm impressed with your neuroscience knowledge.
Thank you so
That's
much.
accurate. Yep.
Is that
It's
that
prefrontal
help?
cortex.
Good, good, good. Glad to hear
Well
it.
said. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. I can't believe it's been an hour already. I mean, there's so many pieces that you all have pulled out, so many lessons from the process to things that are in the play. So I hope folks are definitely going to be encouraged to see the play. But I do want you all to have a chance to give people maybe a last thought about what you hope that folks will take from this. Jake, any thoughts there? And you've alluded to some of it already.
Yeah. I mean, I think from the play, I hope that folks leave feeling affirmed, leave feeling like the play was a celebration of life and not a play about the troubles of addiction or the
Mm.
curse of dementia. The play is about people who love each other, doing their best, walking through the world. And I hope that folks are able to have difficult conversations because they understand that there's a lot of humor that can pull them through their lives that will make those difficult conversations um, memorable, not just in a bad way.
Hmm.
Yeah. And sort of just like knowing the power of not knowing, I think big was the big lesson for me, and I hope is at the center of the play.
Yeah. Well said. Carolyn, any thoughts on what
Well,
what you
I
want
think
folks to walk away with?
hoping people will take away from it, especially in terms of this man's journey, is that, you know, what we think of, I'm like thinking about it even in Jake's particular circumstances. If he had never been an addict, he might not have ever been home again to have the experience of bringing all these people back into his present. That
Mm.
if he'd been just a kind of normal guy that went through college and then his ambitions started to carry him forward throughout his life, I mean, I think, what I hope people take away from it is how much we need each other.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
where our real possibilities of being realized come from, not from us, our own personal drive, but also let's realize that life is a team sport.
Mm.
You really, we really need to be surrounded by each other
Yeah. Yeah.
in order to become our best selves. And I think that's a wonderful part of this play. He has surrounded himself with a completely different generation, with parts of his family. He even says at one point, that when his grandmother started to reject him because of his sexuality a little bit, he still he still wanted to be a part of her
Hmm.
in a
Yeah.
way. That's something that has been a lesson for me because, based on what's going on right now, I'll hear what people's belief is, and then they're not in my life anymore. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
like, wait, what am I missing now? That if I
Yeah.
decide that this person is just banished from my world or even from
Mm.
my mind, I'm also maybe depriving myself of something. And that's what I hope people take away from this. Let me look closer at the people I've dismissed or been
Mm.
indifferent. Maybe I take a closer look at that and what they
Mm.
have.
Yeah. Wow. So well said. Well, I appreciate you all joining this podcast. I say this sometimes, but this is one where I think listeners should go back and re-listen to many of the things that you all mentioned, the gems that you've dropped, and definitely to be able to see the production as well. Especially appreciate you all coming on such a busy day with rehearsal and
Thank
another performance and a root canal, which hopefully will go well,
Yes,
Jake.
totally.
But
Absolutely.
my goodness.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being on the Addy Hour podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Of
and everybody
course.
see the show. We promise you will be happy.
Oh, yeah.